Warning, this may be too violent for young viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
Party's over. Wrap it up and go home. I'm gonna miss Derek, bro. I'm gonna miss Derek, bro. I f***ed up, dude. I made a mistake, yo. Ah! I feel so dumb. Oh no, not the 2x2x2. Jeff, there's no time for adulting, Jeff. Drop. What is going on? Oh god, no. No. Every day, bro, with the Disney Channel flow.
Evan, help me, bro.
Oh, thanks for bringing my dog back today and not losing him. What are you doing?
Yo.
Okay, don't honk the horn.
Why?
It's so much worse because he's oh now he's stopping. He's getting out of the car.
Stop talking.
Okay, well.
Yes.
Do you know who I am? Is there a reason you honked at me?
Crap, can you back up?
What is he gonna do?
Well, I don't know. He's kind of crazy. These kind of people do crazy stuff.
What?
Oh my god, he has two shirts. You're gonna be scared of a guy who has two shirts?
Okay.
Yo, buddy.
Okay, we're sorry. We're sorry. Go back in your car.
Stop saying sorry.
Well,
Yo. Okay, could you move now? He's not gonna do anything.
Back up. Go around him. I don't know.
Chill. You're not about to hit my car with a bat right now.
What did you just say?
You are not about to hit my car with a bat.
Are you right?
See, I told you he's not gonna do anything.
I got something better.
Hey.
Oh my god.
You should probably just leave.
I'm just gonna back up.
It's for you.
What the heck is that?
Is that a mini version of him?
You unleashed the basement bomb squad.
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
What is happening?
Oh my god. No. I'll do it.
I'm good.
Cause I don't think you good, bro. Me off.
You're pissing me
And
off.
I'm already salty.
Okay.
Home.
No! You are ridiculous!
And I got a plate, Ayla.
I'm funny guy.
Don't. It's in the lobby. You're gonna get in trouble.
I'm not in the lobby.
No, there's cameras here. Literally right there.
Is that a camera?
That's a camera.
Oh no.
Don't do it. You're stupid.
I'm not stupid, I'm Logan.
Well, Logan is stupid. If you look up stupid, there's a picture of you right next to it.
That might be true. Fire department came.
What?
Hi. Good morning. Sorry.
What is wrong with you?
I don't know.
A confetti shooter.
Oh, that's kind of dope.
Ah!
Oh, no.
I'm so angry, I just want to break something like that plate conveniently placed there.
Do it. Don't. Stop. Don't.
Where you going?
What's up, Logan?
What's up, dude?
Just a question, dog. How many plates have you broken on your channel?
I don't know, maybe like 50?
Ooh, 50! Wow, that's cute. That's cute. Well done, Logie.
Thanks.
Well done, buddy.
It's whatever, honestly.
Oh, what the bro? I just broke more plates in 1 second than you have in your whole channel, mate.
Your plates, dude.
The USB was password protected, Logan.
We're not giving you shit.
You're gonna have to, or I'm gonna kill Ayla. And your cat calm.
No! He's not a cat, he's a dog.
Well, it looks like a little pussy.
What do you boys want?
Play it off.
You don't want to do this, Rocket Twins. You don't want to do this, boys.
A few inches later.
Australian boys made a mess! Would you clean it up, please?
I'm not cleaning this mess, I swear!
Oh, shit! Yeah! Ayla! That's my girl! Oh, okay. Whoa, whoa! He's a psycho. Are you good, bro? Don't remove his balls again!
12 seconds later.
All this for a password? And they couldn't figure out that it's Logan is a Virgin 69. Hey! F you! It's Virgin 69 and you know that!
For some reason, I decided to put every SpongeBob time card ever. Don't ask why.
2,000 years later. 6.5 hours later. A few inches later. Day 2, Day 3, Day 4. A few moments later. 1 eternity later. 3 days later. 12 seconds later. 3:28 a.m. 3 weeks later. Many months later.
So much later that the old narrator got tired of waiting and they had to hire a new one.
Tomorrow. Tomorrow for sure. Eventually. 12 o'clock midnight. 1 hour later. 2 hours later. 3 hours later. While Patchy pulls himself together, let's see how SpongeBob's party is shaping up. Meanwhile, 2 hours later. 8:01 p.m. The next day. Later. 20 minutes later. 6 hours later. Several bad puns later.
70 years later.
Meanwhile, 6 hours later. Later that same evening, several days later. 6 months later. 2 hours later. 1 minute, 37 seconds later. 1 debt to society later. 4 to 6 weeks later. 1 pair of pants later. 8 hours later. 298 frozen patties later. 3 hours later. Epilogue. The next day, 10 seconds later. 346 minutes later. Much later. Meanwhile, at the Krusty Krab. 3 days later. Opening night. Later. 3,000 years later. 1 week later, 7:59 a.m. 3 weeks later, 3 days later, 2 hours later, 2 hours later, 48 hours later, 8 hours later. The following Thursday, 5 minutes later, 24 hours later, much later, much later, 7 hours later, epilogue. Several song-filled hours later, a few minutes later, a little longer than a few minutes later, 2 hours later, 3 days later, 15 minutes later, several months later, thousands of tears later, 16 paranoia-filled days later, 2 hours later, much later, yesterday, many hours later, 75 years later, 2 hours later, 1 extremely annoying shift later, 2 very boring minutes later, 3 hours later, 1 winner later, the following day, meanwhile, later, just then. What follows is a brief construction montage. We hope you enjoyed this brief construction montage. Meanwhile, back in the lowland, 1 frozen wasteland later, 1 hour later, 5 hours later, 2 days later, later in the void, approximately 10 hours later, early the next morning, 1 shift later, 2 weeks later, 11 minutes later, 5 minutes later, a lot of boring math later, 24 hours later, 1 week later, 1 long angry line later, 72 hours later, 2 hours later, just then, by sheer coincidence, the next morning, montage. The next morning, many tic-tacs later, flashback, end of flashback. The very next evening, 1 hour later. The next day, later, 4 to 6 days later, 4 to 6 more days later. The next morning, moments later, more moments later, 1 semester later, graduation day.
1 hour later!
80,000 impressions later. Would you please stop imitating me? It is starting to get very annoying. 3,000 whoop-whoos later. Soon after. Later. Moments later. Later. The next morning. Many unbearable hours later.